Curious, Hoseok asked what brought him there. Iroon responded that he was there for the Darknet's access rights. Hoseok told him he wouldn't have the authority to make that kind of request. Iroon then threw a symbol mark onto the counter. Shocked, Hoseok recognized what it was and asked in disbelief if Iroon was a Grand Elder. Iroon asked if it wasn't obvious. Hoseok admitted he didn't understand how that could be, but added that such a request would require a hefty price. Iroon calmly told Hoseok he had some information for him. Nervously, Hoseok asked what information he was referring to. Iroon replied that the blood demon of this generation was being replaced. Hoseok asked him what he meant by the replacement of the blood demon. Hoseok couldn't believe it and shouted that it was impossible, but Iroon simply asked him why he thought it was impossible and told him that he spoke as if he knew a lot about the Blood King's palace. A sharp piece of blood then appeared near Hoseok's neck, horrifying him. Iroon told Hoseok that he seemed to know a lot about the Blood King's palace, but he didn't know about the replacement of the blood demon, which meant there was a rat in the Blood King's palace. Yet, Hoseok just asked him if he even realized what he was doing, but Iroon asked him back if he was one of the elders or a member of the blood sect. Hoseok simply warned him not to do something he would regret while reaching for the sword hidden under the counter. Iroon then felt the gaze of the men behind him and heard Hoseok grab the sword. He released the spiked blood he had aimed at Hoseok while saying that it didn't matter now and asked about the authority over the Darknet. Hoseok replied that he couldn't grant authority over the Darknet from his position and that he had to report it to the higher-ups to get permission. Iroon told Hoseok that he already knew that much, but what he was saying was that he had to meet him, the Black King, which shocked Hoseok and everyone inside the bar. Hoseok and the others then aimed their swords at him, warning that he was crossing the line. Hoseok furiously asked if he really thought he could say that name here and survive, but Iroon simply asked him back if he was just overreacting because of his name. Hoseok told him that it seemed becoming an elder was a lie, given that he didn't know anything, and if that was the case, it meant he was not from the blood sect. Hoseok then asked him what his purpose was, piercing the tip of the sword into his neck while warning him that if he spoke the truth, he would let him go without pain. Yet, Iroon simply said, "Blood." Hoseok was confused. He then looked at his sword and saw blood crawling along it. Iroon watched it spread and told Hoseok, "The blood is flowing." Eventually, the blood crawled onto Hoseok's hand and spread inside his body at an alarming speed. Hoseok gasped in pain, worrying his men. Iroon explained to Hoseok that the blood of the true blood sect was immune to all poison, which meant that poison dissolved in whiskey was meaningless. However, the same poison, when introduced into blood immune to all toxins, could become a fatal and deadly poison. He then watched Hoseok struggle and tremble in pain. Hoseok's men furiously aimed their swords closer to Iroon, but he simply told Hoseok not to worry because he wouldn't kill him. He also stated that he didn't want to damage the relationship between the Blood Sect and the Black King. He then asked Hoseok if he was right in believing that he should be qualified to meet the Black King. But still, Hoseok disagreed. Iroon released his blood onto the floor while asking Hoseok if he was correct in saying that the former blood demon had saved the Black King's life. He then released a swarm of blood spikes from the blood on the floor and told Hoseok that, in order to repay that favor, the Black King had been helping the Blood Sect ever since. The blood spikes surrounded the men behind him. He glanced back at them and told them that he was the new blood demon of the Blood Sect, shocking Hoseok even more. However, Hoseok still couldn't believe it and thought it was ridiculous. Suddenly, a man's voice spoke, stating that if that was the case, then he was fully qualified. The statement surprised Hoseok, who then asked the Black King if he had been watching everything. Hoseok was stunned in shock upon hearing the Black King speak himself. Iroon then reabsorbed his blood and removed the poison from Hoseok's body. He then ordered Hoseok to guide him to the Black King. A moment later, they arrived at the party bar, where people were dancing inside. Iroon followed Hoseok, complaining that it was noisy, but Hoseok remained quiet, wondering if Iroon wasn't nervous. After all, he was the blood demon. But to the Black King, who ruled the darkness across the entire Asian continent, he was nothing more than the ruler of a collapsing world. Yet, Hoseok wondered why the Black King wanted to meet him personally. They eventually arrived at the VIP room, guarded by two massive men. One of the guards stopped them and told Hoseok that he couldn't go any further. Hoseok looked back at Iroon and told him that this was as far as he would go. He then walked past Iroon, wishing him good luck. Once Hoseok was gone, the two guards nodded at each other before one of them scanned a card, unlocking the gate. The guard then told Iroon to follow him, which he did. As he walked upstairs, he noticed how skilled the guard was. It was a shame he was just a gatekeeper here. He then glanced back at the people inside the club, realizing that most of them were high rankers of the Black Sect. As they reached the top, the guard stopped walking and told him that this was it. Iroon continued past another set of stairs, walking past the guards stationed on each step. He eventually reached the top, and when he touched the door, it suddenly vanished, transporting him inside a house. He looked around and saw a man seated on the sofa. The man casually explained that he didn't mean to surprise him, and that, since he was a somewhat important figure there, security was tight. The man then welcomed him, but Iraun remained silent. The man then introduced himself that he is the master of that place, the Black King. The Black King then offered him a seat, which he accepted and sat down with his feet crossed. The Black King then asked him if he would like a glass and told him that it was quite a decent drink, but he replied no, and explained that even if he drank, he wouldn't get drunk, but thanked him for the offer. To which the Black King replied that he understood and snapped his fingers, making the bottle of alcohol disappear instantly. The Black King then asked him the reason he wanted to meet him, but he simply asked if he was right that he kept aiding the blood cult. The Black King replied that the world of grace cherishes kindness. He asked the Black King what nonsense he was talking about and told him that there must be another purpose behind it, which made the Black King smirk. The Black King then explained to him that the information about the replacement of the blood demon was quite valuable because it filled in many of the strange gaps, and now the puzzle was complete. The Black King then asked him if the one leading the blood cult now was Kang Han Cheol, but he just asked him back if there were still more rats left. The Black King replied that there was no way, and asked him if he was right that Elder O had died, making him realize that O was the rat. The Black King then laughed and told him that they should just call themselves friends, exchanging necessary information, and although O was a fool who lagged behind in the changing flow of time, allowing someone like Han Cheol to lead the blood cult, unlike those idiots, was a proper decision, because thanks to it, they were expanding their influence by establishing the Galaxy Guild under Yuna's lead. The Black King then stared at him and asked him if it meant the blood demon and the blood cult leader coexisted, but he just replied who knows and asked if it wasn't the principle of the black market that information comes at a cost, to which the Black King replied that it was correct, but he had far too many questions for him and called him Mr. Li Iraun, which pissed him off. The Black King then told him that Shin Hong of the Volcano Guild's raid team had died at the monster carcass disposal site, and Shin Hong went there after hearing that a slave he cared about had died. He added that on that day, a large hole was found in the ceiling of the disposal site, and most of the Volcano slaves had reportedly escaped. Meanwhile, someone came to the black market branch, mentioned an incident from 5 years ago, and accepted a request. But coincidentally, the slave Shin Hong cared about had also been enslaved 5 years ago. The Black King then asked him if he thought all of it was just a coincidence, but he simply replied that he didn't believe in coincidences or fate, which confused the Black King. He then glared at the Black King while releasing a bit of his aura and told him that he created the future he desired with his own hands, which surprised the Black King. The Black King then realized that he deliberately left clues about himself and told him that he was far more interesting than he thought. He then told the Black King that thanks to him, he had made it that far, and that it was still a bit burdensome for him to track him down personally, making the Black King ask if he meant for now and then bursting out laughing. The Black King then shouted that it was excellent and that it seemed like it would be a great deal. The Black King then told him to speak and asked him what he wanted. After their talk, the Black King appeared in someone's office and fixed himself before the gate opened. The Black King then walked inside quietly and kneeled down while reporting that he had returned. He then called a lady looking out of the window his master. She asked him how it went, and he replied that he thought he understood why she was so interested, and noticed that Iraun was an extraordinary human. But how a former player created a core, gained the power of a martial artist, and became the blood demon was still unknown. Moreover, even Iraun's background couldn't be read, making him wonder if Iraun could truly be the legendary blood demon god. She then told him that at first, she thought it might be the work of the Volcano Guild, but the Volcano Guild hadn't even identified Iraun's existence, nor achieved the feat of creating a core for players. She then tightly gripped her hand and shook, making the Black King ask her what she saw. She trembled in fear while telling him that it was impossible that Iraun was a human because he was a monster, plain and simple. She then ordered him to grant Iraun everything he desired so that Iraun could move personally, to which the Black King replied that he understood. The lady then looked at herself in the window glass, thinking that at last, he had arrived. Meanwhile, in Han Cheol's villa in Namyangju, he was in his room training his skills, realizing that his move was a bit risky. He was curious since it was a group with little known about its strengths, but he didn't expect it to be to that extent. He knew that the Black King was beyond what he could handle right now. However, the visit confirmed that a group of that caliber wouldn't assist the blood cult without a reason. He then remembered that Yanwol had told him that the Heavenly Demon Sect and the Blood Demon Sect were important, but there had been a group covertly aiding the blood cult since the past, which was the Hao Moon. The next day, Yuna was stunned and open-mouthed in shock, but he simply asked the Black King in front of them why he was there. The Black King smilingly replied that the investment had been decided, making him even more confused. The Black King then pointed at Yuna while telling him that the Blood Sect sought transformation, then pointed at him while saying that a new blood demon had appeared. As an investor, one must naturally invest in ventures with high growth potential. The Black King then approached Una to give his card to her. He then apologized for the late introduction and introduced himself as Hasa Min. She accepted the card while thanking Min and rushed to Irun. She then whispered to him that the investment terms were unbelievably favorable. She got even closer and whispered that they were so good that it was almost suspicious. So she had reviewed the investment contract multiple times, but there was no problem at all. At that level, even without selling Gangha Group, it was more than sufficient. He agreed with her and told her to just back off a little. He then approached Min and asked if they could talk separately for a moment, which Min immediately agreed to. A minute later, when they were in a separate room, he closed the door tightly and faced Min, who was still smiling. He then seriously asked him what his real agenda was, making Min ask him back what he meant by agenda and responding that he was merely exploring possibilities as an investor. But Ro-Woon told Min that was not what he meant, and asked him what he meant by saying he was joining the Galactic Guild. Min simply told him that he thought he would already know, that Ro-Woon was someone with many secrets, and that they, of Black City, were very curious about those secrets. He added that he just wanted to confirm them for himself, up close. Min was surprised and confused when Ro-Woon asked if he was sure it wasn't something ordered by his superiors. Min's reaction changed immediately, and he seriously told him that he was not sure what he meant when he was called the Black City King. Ro-Woon noticed Min's reaction and laughingly explained that if there was a Black City King, he figured there might also be a Black City Emperor. Min seriously told him that he was not very good with jokes, but Ro-Woon simply asked Min if it was really okay for someone called a king to wander around like that. Min proudly replied that a well-organized group operates just fine even without its leader present. Ro-Woon told Min that he envied it, but Min told him not to worry because the blood sect would function the same way since he had personally stepped in. Min then added that the authority for the Darknet had already been granted as well, which surprised Ro-Woon. He asked Min what authority he was referring to when he hadn't received anything. Min told him that the Darknet wasn't a mere object and explained that it was the secret meeting place where all the world's information converges and that the authority referred to the right to participate there. However, since it would be burdensome for him to reveal himself directly, Min would act as his proxy for the time being. Upon hearing Min's offer, Ro-Woon asked him what about the thing he had been searching for, and Min replied that he was just about to tell him that he had found the magic user. Ro-Woon knew that the magic user was Bondeno and remembered Bondeno telling him that he was like him, making him naturally think that Bondeno would be dead. Min then typed something into his phone while telling him that there was a problem. He then gave the phone to Ro-Woon and told him that Bondeno's dungeon, Armo's location, had been exposed, which surprised him. Min then told him that it was in Ganghwa Island, within the sphere of influence of the Hainem Guild. The next day, in Armo's dungeon, an elder shouted for everyone to gather around. He then introduced himself as Yuk Sagul, an elder of the Hainem faction. The others were excited to see Sagul, knowing that he was the Swift Sword. They then respectfully greeted him, saying that if someone like him stepped in, things would become much easier. However, a player was pissed upon seeing Sagul, and the man asked how annoying the elder would turn out to be. But then, the man was shocked when Sagul appeared next to him. The man broke into a cold sweat in fear and tried to explain in a stuttering voice while wondering how long Sagul had been listening. But then Sagul punched him in the stomach, causing the man to cough up blood and kneel on the ground, holding his stomach in pain. Sagul then called the man a maggot and took his sword out while telling the man that his head was filled with demonic energy. Sagul then pointed the sword at the man's head and told him that he would personally extract that demonic energy from his head, making the man beg Sagul to forgive him. But Sagul just raised his sword to kill the man. Fortunately, someone covered the man from Sagul and shouted for him to stop. Sagul asked the players if the man in front of him was one of their guild members, and if he was the guild master of Gyeodong, Kang Cheol-woo. Yet Sagul told them that even if Cheol-woo was a member of their guild, he couldn't stop because it was his duty as a righteous martial artist to eradicate demonic energy. Cheol-woo told Sagul that the man was not demonic and that he would vouch for him, making Sagul angrier and asking Cheol-woo if he was saying he was wrong. Yet Cheol-woo swore that he would prove it in the dungeon, which surprised Sagul but calmed him down. Sagul then put his sword back and told Cheol-woo that if he was willing to go that far, he would trust him and watch closely. Sagul then walked away, shouting to everyone that they would be entering soon, so they should finish their preparations quickly. Cheol-woo then reached for the man's hand and explained to his members that, to them, players like them were nothing but dogs, because unlike them, who grew stronger through training and enlightenment, players only grew stronger by killing monsters, so they saw the players as despicable beings. Cheol-woo then warned the man that if he couldn't bite, he shouldn't bark because that was the only way to survive and grow old as a mutt. The man trembled and remained silent for a moment before finally accepting Cheol-woo's hand and agreeing with him. Cheol-woo then called out to the other team next to them and asked if he was right in assuming they were from the Shadow Guild, to which the guildmaster replied yes. Cheol-woo told the guildmaster of the Shadow Guild that he had never heard of them, so they must be a new guild and should be careful if they wanted to survive long in that field. The guildmaster smiled upon hearing it, and Ro-Woon replied that he understood while releasing a sharp blood spike behind him, ready to kill Sagul at any time. A day before, Min told him that the key to Armo was in Hanem's possession and that he had tried to handle it himself, but it seemed they had already formed a subjugation squad. Min then explained to him that there were two ways to approach it. One was to disguise themselves as the Ghost Guild of Hoixi and join the subjugation squad, and the other was to steal the key. Min added that if it was Hoixi, it was not an impossible task, so he should just say the word, and he would order the subordinates to retrieve the key. Min then asked him what he would choose to do, making him pissed and asking Min back if he was testing him. He then told Min that he knew if he were to make such a request, he would surely demand a price worthy of it, and told Min that he had no intention of owing him a debt over something of that level. He then warned Min not to dare try to test him, making Min smile and ask him if he was right in knowing what it meant to take an investment from them. Min then stood up, telling him that they would proceed with the first method and that he should prepare the followers who would join the subjugation squad. Min then walked past him and wished him good fortune before leaving the room, leaving him pissed, thinking that Min wouldn't be able to keep that attitude forever and that the one who needed to be tested was not him, but Min. Back at the Armo dungeon, Sagul swiftly swung his sword forward, striking the huge wall in front of them and shattering it into pieces. The others then praised Sagul for being impressive because he had cut down the massive wall, making Sagul laugh and reply that at the very least, it was what was expected of an elder of Hanem. Sagul then glared at the players and asked them what they were all standing around for. He then ordered them to move ahead quickly, to which Cheol-woo replied yes, and that they would proceed immediately. Cheol-woo then told his team that they should head to the Gyeodong Guild. The players then started walking forward while Sagul called them worthless fools. Cheol-woo then told his team that, as they had heard, they were the scouting party, so they should prioritize investigating the interior of the dungeon and report any anomalies, to which they all replied that they understood. Cheol-woo warned them to be cautious of magical traps as they proceeded since it was a dungeon created by magicians, but he was unaware that one of his men was about to step on a trap. When he noticed it, it was too late, and the man stepped on it. Cheol-woo shouted for the man to look out and rush toward him, but the place where the man was standing exploded, triggering other traps in the floor as well. Fortunately, Cheol-woo managed to drag the man away. Cheol-woo then called out to the man, Minho, in worry, and asked if he was all right. Minho was injured, but he still apologized to Cheol-woo, making Cheol-woo ask him what he was apologizing for and telling him to drink the potion immediately. Cheol-woo then walked to the front and was relieved that there were no severe injuries, but then Sagul appeared, saying that he couldn't believe they couldn't even avoid it and called them pathetic fools. Sagul then told them that there was no time to whine and ordered them to move to the next area at once, but Cheol-woo responded that if they proceeded without treating the injured, it would only cause further delays and begged Sagul to allow a brief moment for treatment. However, Sagul told Cheol-woo that if they hadn't triggered the trap in the first place, it wouldn't have happened, and warned him that this time, he would give him one chance, but there wouldn't be a next time, to which Cheol-woo agreed and thanked Sagul for it. Sagul then turned around and walked away while shouting that they would take a short break, regroup, and recover. Cheol-woo then looked around and noticed Iran and Jisoo next to him. He was shocked that they didn't have a single scratch on them, and more than that, they were spotless, without even a speck of dust, making Cheol-woo wonder if they were equipped with some extraordinary item and think about how expensive such items must be. Jisoo used telepathy to ask Iran if he should cut Cheol-woo down because he kept staring at his face. But Iran angrily told Jisoo not to overdo it and explained that Bondeno was no ordinary opponent, which meant breaking through that dungeon wouldn't be easy. He added that if an opportunity arose, he would speak, but until then, Jisoo should avoid drawing attention, to which Jisoo replied that he understood. Suddenly, a lady rushed to them, calling out to Cheol-woo and reporting that it seemed they had found the exit. Cheol-woo told her that it was perfect timing and that the regrouping was nearly complete, but then the lady told him that there was a problem, which confused Cheol-woo. A moment later, they arrived at the exit and saw a sacrificial magic circle in front of it. Cheol-woo told them that the correct course of action would be to retreat for now, bring in technicians, and deactivate it before proceeding. However, Sagul just told them to step aside and took out his sword. Activating his Blue Wave Sword ultimate technique, Great Blue Wave, he released it toward the magic circle. His power struck the magic circle perfectly, and he confidently told them that destroying and moving past a mere magic trap should be enough. They then waited for the smoke to clear, but when it did, Sagul was shocked to see that the magic circle was still intact. Sagul couldn't believe that it didn't even have a scratch and wondered if it was truly a sacrificial magic circle. He knew it was strange for something like that to appear there, far from the Western lands. But then he remembered his sect leader telling him that he looked forward to good news, making Sagul think that he couldn't face his sect leader if they were to retreat like that. Cheol-woo suggested to Sagul that they withdraw for now, but Sagul simply responded that if it was a sacrificial magic circle, they should just offer a sacrifice, which shocked Cheol-woo and made him think that the insane old man was really going through with it. Sagul then told them that he would give them the chance to die honorably. Cheol-woo reminded Sagul that their mission was reconnaissance, so there was no reason for meaningless sacrifices. However, Sagul just shouted at Cheol-woo to shut up and asked if he had any guarantee that those sorcerers would stay trapped inside forever. He questioned what would happen if they escaped and harmed their comrades elsewhere, and if he believed that powerless fools like them could stop those sorcerers, which left them all in shock. Sagul then aimed his sword at them and told Cheol-woo that if he still claimed he was wrong, he would consider him one of the sorcerers and kill him himself. Sagul then asked Cheol-woo if he hadn't said he would prove he was not one of them and ordered him to choose who would be the sacrifice. Cheol-woo clenched his teeth in anger, thinking that he had always lived as a player, ready to face death at any moment. However, dying because of those trash's greed felt like a meaningless death. Cheol-woo then wondered if it was a death that suited someone like him, someone who had chosen to live as a stray dog. He then replied that he couldn't choose, but then Iraun asked Cheol-woo something using telepathy. Cheol-woo peeked back at him, recognizing his voice and confirming that it was indeed him, making Cheol-woo wonder if he was really using telepathy right now, and how a player could use a martial artist's technique. Sagul laughed and told Cheol-woo that he understood that he couldn't bring himself to send his guild member, so he would send someone else instead. Cheol-woo replied that it wasn't what he meant, but Iraun told him to do as he said and assured him that he wouldn't resent him for offering him as a sacrifice. If he wanted to survive, he should just follow his instructions. This made Cheol-woo wonder what was going on. Why was Iraun volunteering? Did Iraun not care about his life? Sagul firmly ordered Cheol-woo to stop hesitating and make a choice already. He then told Cheol-woo that if he wanted to die, he should just keep standing there like that. Cheol-woo gripped his hand tightly, knowing there was no way he wanted to die. He then told Sagul that he would offer the Dark Shadow Guild, to which Sagul agreed. Jisoo was pissed upon hearing this and, through telepathy, asked how dare Cheol-woo point his chin at the great and noble blood demon. Jisoo then asked Iraun to allow him to crush Sagul's jaw, but Iraun simply told Jisoo to read the room. Iraun then walked forward, and his team followed, walking past Cheol-woo's team, who couldn't look at them out of shame. They entered the magic circle and stood in the middle in silence. Cheol-woo was shocked when the magic circle didn't activate and wondered why. Sagul then realized that if the sacrificial magic circle was strong enough to block his ultimate technique, 10 sacrifices wouldn't be enough. That must have meant that the mages inside were that powerful, and that even more sacrifices would be necessary. Sagul then ordered Cheol-woo to choose the next person to be sacrificed. Cheol-woo wanted to tell Sagul not to act righteous when he was nothing but trash, but he couldn't. Instead, he kept his mouth shut. Then, he heard Iraun telling him to add more, but instead of offering someone to die, he should choose someone to save. This left Cheol-woo even more confused. What kind of nonsense was that? Iraun then said that, judging by his dumb expression, he didn't get it, and repeated that he should offer someone to save as a sacrifice. Cheol-woo wondered if he was supposed to believe that. Yet even if he didn't believe him, there was no other way to resolve the situation. Sagul then shouted at Cheol-woo, saying there was no time and that he needed to choose the next sacrifice quickly. Cheol-woo knew that even if he survived without becoming a sacrifice, those trash would definitely kill whoever was left. They wouldn't want the rumor of clearing the dungeon by sacrificing players to spread, so it was better to take the chance to live, no matter how slim, than to die miserably by their hands. He then called Kim Minho to go up, which surprised Minho. His teammates shouted at Cheol-woo that it wasn't right, and that they should go instead because Minho had just graduated high school. He was just a kid. But Cheol-woo just shouted at his team to shut up, gripping his hand so tightly that it bled. He then explained to them that there would be no changes, and ordered Minho to go. Minho sadly told everyone that Cheol-woo's decision was correct because he had always been a burden and useless. He was relieved that he could finally repay the guild in some way. Minho then bowed to Cheol-woo and thanked him for everything before walking closer to the magic circle. With a shaking body, Minho stepped into the magic circle, but it didn't activate. This made Minho's team feel somewhat relieved, but then they realized that, in the end, someone still had to sacrifice themselves. Sagul then shouted at Cheol-woo, demanding to know why he was just standing there, and ordered him to keep offering sacrifices until the magic circle activated. A moment later, almost everyone was inside the magic circle. Cheol-woo noticed that everyone except him and their leader Guy Yang had stepped onto the formation, but it still hadn't activated. Cheol-woo was horrified because he had never heard of a sacrificial magic circle of that scale. How could such a thing exist in such a small dungeon? He then looked at Iraun, wondering what he had done to the magic circle. Could someone like him, a player, really pull this off? If Iraun truly had that kind of power, Cheol-woo thought, he might actually survive. Iraun then told Cheol-woo that there was only one more left. This was his last chance to survive. He then asked Cheol-woo if he would die or live. Cheol-woo knew that saying he didn't want to live would be a lie. Up until now, he had played the dog, flattering those disgusting bastards just to survive. But he couldn't sacrifice others just so he could live. Cheol-woo then bowed to his leader, Guy Yang, and apologized before telling him to become the sacrifice. Yang ordered Cheol-woo to raise his head and told him that he had wanted to be the sacrifice all along, but Cheol-woo had never called his name until now. However, Yang was curious. Why was someone like Cheol-woo, who always cared deeply for his guild members, making that choice now? But Cheol-woo remained quiet. Yang then held Cheol-woo's shoulder softly and told him that he must have his reasons, so he should make sure to survive. Cheol-woo then watched as Yang walked toward the magic circle, thinking that he would always be remembered as the despicable man who sacrificed his comrades to survive. But it didn't matter to him, because if he could save everyone, none of it mattered. Even though he had lived as a player, acting like the dog of martial artists just to get this far, in the end, he wouldn't die a dog. Iraun then acted surprised, confusing Cheol-woo. He then said that it seemed the sacrifices were still insufficient. Using telepathy again, he told Cheol-woo that there was still one more, but he was curious about what choice he would make in the end. This made Cheol-woo smile and call him a bastard. Sagul then told Cheol-woo that it was finally his turn and that he would never forget their sacrifices. But Cheol-woo simply walked toward the magic circle and told Sagul that he was spewing nonsense, shocking Sagul and his team. One of Sagul's men was about to draw his sword, but Sagul told him to leave Cheol-woo alone. He was as good as dead anyway. Iraun then told Cheol-woo to come on up. Cheol-woo asked him if he was sure everyone there would survive. Minho and Yang overheard him, but Iraun simply replied that they would see soon enough. The magic circle then activated. Sagul told his team to brace themselves, but then another magic circle appeared beneath Sagul and his team. Sagul panicked and asked what was happening. Then, the magic circle in Sagul's direction exploded, leaving Cheol-woo's team and Iraun's team safe and sound. Cheol-woo was shocked even more, but he calmly told them to watch closely, because this was the fate of those who forced others to sacrifice themselves. The ceiling collapses due to the powerful explosion from the magic circle while they remain inside the safe magic circle. As they wait, he tells Cheol-woo that the magic circle had been like that from the beginning, and that if a sacrifice is offered, the passage explodes. Cheol-woo asks how he knows this, but he simply replies that he just knows a lot of things. Cheol-woo then comments that it's a relief and that luckily the number of sacrifices matched the number of players, because if it hadn't, he might have ended up in there too. However, he is shocked when he is told that originally, only one sacrifice was required. He then explains that while he cannot destroy or create a new magic circle yet, modifying one is easy. Cheol-woo finds it hard to believe that a martial artist can modify a magic circle just by transmitting their aura and wonders if a player can do the same. He then asks just who in the world he is, but before he can answer, Sagul slashes the stones above him, completely shattering them into pieces. Sagul then furiously calls them insolent wretches and releases a powerful slash in their direction. As the slash nears him, Jisoo immediately moves forward and counters Sagul's attack. Furious, Jisoo asks Sagul how he dares to target such an esteemed presence and releases a strong aura. Sagul notices that it is inner power and asks if they are martial artists. He and his members then aim their swords at them, questioning whether they think they can survive after making an enemy of Hainam and infiltrating the subjugation squad to harm them while hiding their identity. As Iraun expected, Sagul's sword was something else, and thanks to it, those around Sagul survived. He then aims his hand in Sagul's direction, thinking they should see if they can withstand his attack too. However, Jisoo suddenly asks if they can grant them an opportunity. Jisoo is about to ask how they dare attack the Blood Demon King when he is interrupted. He calls Jisoo a guild member and uses telepathy to ask if he plans to reveal his entire identity. Jisoo is stunned in fear upon sensing his presence and corrects himself, realizing he cannot allow it because they dared to harm his esteemed presence as the guildmaster. Lowering his hand in agreement, he tells Jisoo to proceed, adding that they seem like fitting opponents for him. Jisoo thanks him for the opportunity, knowing that on the day of the Blood Demon's arrival, due to his ignorance, he committed the unforgivable sin of failing to recognize the true Blood Demon and even pointing his sword at him. This was his chance to atone for his sins, even just a little. Jisoo then steps forward and calls upon his Shadow Guild, instructing them to eliminate the enemies of their guild member and not to display disgraceful behavior. They all respond in understanding. Sagul, enraged by Jisoo's words, demands how they dare forget who he is. He shouts that he is Elder Yuk Sagul of the Great Hainam and swings his sword forward, but Jisoo easily blocks it, shocking and confusing Sagul. Jisoo then tells Sagul that his sins must be cleansed with his blood. The Shadow Guild members then launch themselves at Sagul's men, and both sides engage in battle while Iraun, Cheol-woo, and Cheol-woo's team watch. Cheol-woo asks whether they should help, but he simply asks Cheol-woo what he means by help, and whom they should assist. Cheol-woo is about to respond, but stops when he sees that the Shadow Guild members have the advantage. None of them can believe they are overpowering the warriors of Hainam, and even Sagul himself is struggling. Meanwhile, as Sagul fights Jisoo, he wonders what kind of bizarre swordsmanship this is. He then tells Cheol-woo that he needs experience points, prompting Cheol-woo to ask what he means by that. He simply replies that the Shadow Guild needs to understand how modern martial artists fight. On the other hand, Jisoo senses something ominous. He knows that Sagul is clearly at a disadvantage, but he wonders why the atmosphere feels strangely calm. Suddenly, Sagul dodges Jisoo's attack and asks if he is from one of the stray sects, remarking that he is lacking, meaning he must not have been practicing for long. In response, Jisoo releases a powerful slash, which Sagul blocks, but the force pushes him backward. Still, Sagul remains composed, raises his sword, and tells Jisoo that he will show him the true sword of Hainam. Jisoo is shocked by Sagul's power and immediately leaps forward, Noticing that Sagul's stance has changed, he intends to end the fight immediately. Jisoo launches his sword at Sagul, but Sagul easily blocks it, surprising him, as he was sure he had aimed for an opening. Sagul then activates his skill, Haste, and speeds behind Jisoo before he can even notice.